Thomas Jefferson's legacy is one that is pretty enigmatic amongst people. When I was in high school, one of the things that we were told was that Jefferson was an enigma. He did the things he did because nobody really understood. I don't find this to be true, but I do find that the knowledge about Jefferson has evolved over time. Today, I'm mostly going to focus on the 1777 Bill of Religious Freedom that he proposed and what that entailed, what types of things Jefferson wanted, and how that came about. But to start, I want to give an overview of what people know Thomas Jefferson as. So most people know Jefferson as the father of the Declaration of Independence, somebody who was very adamant about a separation between church and state, the main proprietor of the Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment being most important to him, but also somebody who was not a perfect person, as he fathered a child with a slave named Sally Hemings. There are lots of common misconceptions about Jefferson. Most people believe he did not actually father a child with this woman, and that people really weren't. These kids weren't related to him. A lot of people think that he alone fathered the Declaration of Independence, which is untrue, and that he wanted a separation of church and state at all costs, which is what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, the 1777 Bill of Religious Freedom affirmed the intellectual and spiritual independence that Jefferson was seeking, and a lot of people compare it to the Declaration of Independence in the way that it was written and the purpose for why it was written. Jefferson's reviews, peer reviews for Jefferson's work, included statements of the bill being an eloquent manifesto of the sanctity of the human mind and spirit, and James Madison called it an integral forever the ambitious hope of making laws for the human mind. These are big praise for the Jefferson Bill. Lots of people saw Jefferson as radical and somebody who would have stopped at nothing to achieve the separation of church and state, but that's not true. Even though from the beginning of Jefferson's career as a politician in colonial America, people saw him as a proprietor of a separate church and state. And when the bill was being written, a lot of people viewed Jefferson as radical and too opinionated and too inspired by this idea. But this isn't true. Jefferson heard this criticism of him, and instead of him thinking that he was going to get his way no matter what, which I think a lot of people seem to think about him, he took the time to really slow down and make sure that his views were not undesirable by the rest of the country. He did not want to create a 100% separate church and state. Jefferson did think that there was some value between the church and the state being connected, and that they could offer things to each other. Much like that of the New Lights, Quakers, which we discussed in discussion number 1, Jefferson thought that a relationship between the church and state would be beneficial to both parties. So he did not want a complete separation, but he did think that state laws should not be dependent on religion. I think that's why, with a lot of things that America has that have religious references, those are allowed to continue, because Jefferson really wasn't trying to push a full separation. He just wanted most of the laws to be to keep religion out of it. Jefferson took a great deal of time making revisions to his bills that he suggested before he became the French ambassador and after. He took every line with help of another took line by line the wording in it to make sure that it was not radical and not egregious to others who would read it. Some of Jefferson's bills were changed, but over half were unchanged, which means a lot of people agreed with what he had to say. Bill 82 showed a flexible church and state model, once again, which was what I was just talking about, the cooperation between church and state, which would be beneficial to both sides. The bills don't show that Jefferson purely wanted a separation of church and state, but showed that religious belief should be expressed and opinionated fully amongst the people. I think this is really important to Jefferson's legacy because it paints him as somebody who was very thoughtful about this and who wanted religion to be important to people's lives, but not be determined by the government, even though the government did show its support for religion, which is very important because a lot of people just saw him as radical and somebody who was only doing what he thought was best for him in the moment. Rather, Jefferson was more thoughtful about it, and he was doing what was best for people then and in the future.